2024, a year in which people are making up disorders and making entire communities on the internet about it. While there are things like medically unrecognized disorders, there are parts of the internet in which people are literally using ChatGPT to come up with disorders that they have. We have some sort of an understanding about why people might fake disorders on the internet, but when it comes to people making them up, it opens up a whole new can of worms of fantasy. Now that I'm thinking about it, making up disorders is probably less stigmatizing than faking a disorder, because at least this disorder literally doesn't exist. Today we are going to be reviewing some people who literally fabricated disorders that they're now claiming to have. And I thought this might be a funny video, but it's actually quite offensive, especially when it's mixed in with a disorder that actually exists. It's like a fantasy element, and then it's the actual disorder, but a very stigmatized one, such as Fantasychosis or trans autistic. And that comes to a point where we're not laughing anymore. This isn't funny, this is alarming. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, turn the bell on if you're feeling risky, thank you. And we will be talking about this in today's video. Signs that you may be trans autistic. You have to remind yourself to stim, but you feel better when you do it. You hate looking at people in the eyes, but do it on reflex. You hate being called autistic and neurotypical. You know social cues, but hate relying on them. You feel like you're not autistic enough. You have neurodysphoria. When you are neurodivergent, you might have problems with social interactions. You might have sensitivity to certain sounds, touches, along with the stigma that goes along with neurodivergency. And if you have a disorder, it's called a disorder for a reason. It impairs your ability to live your life. I do understand the perspective of like, I am neurodivergent and things are harder for me. So when you call me neurotypical, I'm offended by that, because it's like, I don't have the perspective of someone who is neurotypical. However, to pretend like it's something fun to be neurodivergent is quite offensive. You feel, oh my god, you feel jealous of people with an autism diagnosis. When you struggle with autism spectrum disorder, you might have sensory sensitivities, repetitive behaviors, restrictive interests, difficulty with change, executive functioning challenges. Some people on the spectrum might have an attention to detail, stronger memory skills, be dedicated, focused, and have creativity and unique perspectives. Lusting over that and wishing you had it, being jealous, is kind of a different story. You feel anxious all the time for not being able to transition. You may feel guilty, but you absolutely should not feel guilty. You wish you had more sensory issues. What? Whoa. As someone who, like, I grew up with sensory issues, now it's mostly just hearing, but it can truly impact your life to have sensory issues. Why? You wish you had a special interest or that you had more of them. You get easily overwhelmed, but instead of autistic meltdown, you express it in a NT way. Also, when saying that you want to act like you're on the spectrum, what are you on about here? Are you talking about someone who is actually on the spectrum or the TikTok version of it? This is our generation, everybody. Seeing less faking autism/DID content. Calm. It's being replaced with medically unrecognized disorder content. Panic. MUDs are so idiotic and blatantly harmful, there's no way they'll become a trend. Right? Calm. Right? Panic. Although it might be better for people to play pretend with some made-up disorder instead of spreading false information and stereotypes about a neurological condition, it is still harmful to yourself for making these up. I mean, it can be a maladaptive coping skill that isn't going to get you very far. So deep down in the crevices of the internet is an archive of lots of made-up disorders, which are very interesting. And if you actually do have some of these symptoms, it might be worth seeking a diagnosis of a disorder that is medically recognized, because if you're just here with these symptoms, you can be harmful to yourself or others, such as paranoid explosive disorder, plural obsessive disorder. Wait a second, is that faking DID? Spiteful personality disorder? Yeah, I definitely have that one. Not psychosis, but short-lived psychosis. I wish I could click on this link. What is hypersexual fantasy disorder? Internet addiction disorder. I could see this actually being in the DSM-6. And then there's all of these borderline offensive ones, such as non-binary disorder, which is kind of alluding to the idea that it is a disorder to be like trans, non-binary. When you're a teenager, you have a limited scope of experience, a lack of emotional intelligence, but your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that is responsible for decision making, higher cognitive functioning, planning, impulse control, and personality development, is not developed until you're 26. And so seeing teenagers on the internet doing stuff like that, you almost feel like bad. Fantasychosis, a disorder that lies somewhere between psychosis and maladaptive daydreaming or other fantasy-based disorders. People who maladaptive daydream, emphasis on the maladaptive, might have intense and vivid daydreams and have difficulty controlling that daydreaming. I am very guilty for being a person who would like come up with an entire novel in my head instead of paying attention in class. This is far from maladaptive daydreaming, which is a coping mechanism to deal with stress, trauma, boredom, and loneliness or other difficult emotions. Maladaptive daydreaming can become excessive and interfere with daily life. It can cause distress or impairment in functioning, leading to feelings of guilt, shame, or frustration. They might feel unable to control it, and a fantasy-based disorder, not sure what that is. Intentionally left vague, named by ChatGPT. Feel free to make a flag if you want, I guess. We would, but we're suffering creative burnout and it doesn't really need one. Someone on Reddit said, "What do you mean it doesn't need a flag? Everyone knows it's not a real disorder without a flag." Kids these days, I swear. Did they really just call psychosis and maladaptive daydreaming a fantasy-based disorder? Are you shitting on my nuts right now? That genuinely causes so much distress. What are they on? And yeah, it doesn't need a flag. Many things do not need flags. Most things, in fact. If you or someone you love has ever experienced maladaptive daydreaming or psychosis, I can imagine how frustrating it must be for someone to call something that caused you so much genuine distress a fantasy-based disorder. Someone said, "Hell yeah, bro, psychosis is just like having a daydream. Fucking end me right now. It's more like living in a waking nightmare." Something that made-up disorders suggest is that the DSM is not accurate or helpful in diagnosing things. And while there are things like gender or sex-based biases in the DSM, many clinicians will not refer specifically to the DSM word for word when going through a diagnosis. Also, how are we supposed to help people? Like, yes, I understand that you have this made-up disorder, but how are you going to help yourself to live with it? I guess the answer would be to bask in it and make an online community about it on TikTok or Discord. Pick your poison. Fate syndrome. Some well-known symptoms are hallucinations, constant body pain, trouble breathing, constantly being cold, constant nosebleeds, thoughts of SH, dissociative amnesia, and, coughing up blood. Yeah, at this point, let's not make up a fun disorder with a flag. Let's go to the hospital. If you're doing things like coughing up blood, you need to go to the hospital. That is a serious symptom. Obviously, I cannot imagine people taking this post seriously. And it almost, at this point, is hard to see it as not satire, although part of me believes that it's real. Dissociative borderline/trauma borderline, a term for those who qualify as having BPD, but only when DID, dissociative, or other trauma disorder symptoms are more severe. I mean, it is possible for a person with BPD to have DID. These are two separate diagnoses. I don't know why we have to merge them into one and also add sprinkles of misinformation. A lot of people with DID are misdiagnosed with BPD due to technically fitting the criteria at the time of being checked out, but then undiagnosed with BPD once their DID is discovered due to the BPD symptoms improving or even going away completely as the DID/trauma symptoms improve. Okay, so this label is for people who may have been misdiagnosed, then undiagnosed with BPD, but still identify with some or all of the traits when having a trauma response. My brain. And also, of course, yay, there is a flag for this disorder. Someone on Reddit said, "No, they do not understand what doctors mean when they say symptoms can overlap. Just because they claim to have symptoms of both BPD and DID doesn't mean they have to make up a whole new disorder." Someone said, "A disorder where the only symptom is you are misdiagnosed with a different disorder? Please, I just want the world to make sense again." Yeah, we're gonna move on from this one before my brain explodes. Mental health obsession disorder, or of course, MHOD, is characterized by being obsessed with your mental health disorders, etc., sometimes comorbid with HDD, couldn't tell you what that is. Symptoms include purposefully or accidentally making yourself worse mentally. Certain people might post about their disorders on the internet for a sense of community and understanding. These people understand something that I thought I was the only person who lived with this. It can be quite validating and help people process their symptoms and emotions. But being obsessed with it and making yourself worse, if you have ever experienced any sort of neurodivergency or mental illness, why would you want to make it worse? Common spiraling, breakdowns, etc. Hyper-focusing on mental health or disorders generally, which may lead to obsessing over yours, etc. I'm not here to tell you how much you should or shouldn't obsess over your disorder, but specifically with people who tend to make up disorders or fake disorders, of course you're going to be obsessed with it because it's the maladaptive coping skill you're turning to right now. Also, I understand the point of view of getting worse because dealing with mental illness can be extremely distressing, and we can often, it's go up and then go back down with our symptoms. So in that way, I understand. I mean, let's take something like depression, in the way that you wish you didn't have depression, but you cannot help but not use your coping skills. That's definitely different than having depression and being like, I want to stay depressed, so I'm going to intentionally not use my skills. This is not to make fun of people who are making up disorders, because I can't tell exactly why you would do that. For one person, it might just be something fun. For another person, it might be a response to trauma going on in your life. So why would someone make up a disorder? It could be for attention-seeking purposes. They might have a desire for belonging in online communities that are centered around specific disorders or conditions. People might fake symptoms to feel included or to bond with others who share similar experiences. This behavior could stem from a longing for connection and acceptance. Maybe they even convince themselves that they have these made-up disorders they've encountered online. They might have a misunderstanding of symptoms that can lead them to self-diagnose themselves falsely from these exaggerated experiences. And of course, for secondary gain, such as monetary purposes or to not take responsibility for your actions. In the wild west of the internet, it's important to use critical thinking and approach situations with empathy. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, turn the bell on if you're feeling risky, and comment below. Thank you so much. It helps with the algorithm. Also, thank you so much to my members. It literally means the world to me that people are willing to support me. And my ridiculous YouTube videos. Why do you think people make up disorders online? Is it more of like a teenager thing? Do adults do this? Thank you so much for watching this video as always, and peace out.